This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA.
Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. We have got a great show on tap. Really, man, my man Shaw just knows how to do it, man. He is like the Maverick Carter. Oh, yeah, I'm just saying. You are the Maverick Carter of podcasting right about now, brother. I mean, or what's that other agent? Paul. What's his name?
Rich Paul.
I was going to mistakenly say Chris Paul, but you know,
Yeah.
you got it going on, man. And you know, we have a really great show on tap. It's awesome because we've had, you know, interactions and have worked with this guy in various iterations, and you know, now he is, you know, responsible for what I think is going to be a wonderful website that is going to really help elevate, you know, how important the game of basketball really is and cover the game of basketball in many different aspects. And it's awesome because, you know, he knows a lot of the people that we deal with and work with, all talented individuals. And it's great. Like they form like Voltron right about now and, you know, are ready to just, you know, take over this space like, you know, like wildfire. So it's great stuff. As always, man, I'm going to roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my brother from another mother, Mr. Warren Shaw. What's good, man? You ready to rock and roll with our guest to this evening, man?
Of course, man. As always, man, I'm excited about every show that we do, but this is another special one that we have lined up for our fans and listeners. I think they're going to find a new favorite basketball site out there, you know, with some great content, great podcasts coming on, and multiple friends, as you alluded to, that we've worked with over the past, man. So I'm excited to bring in this one.
Absolutely, man. And again, you know, this is the baseline. This is what we do. As always, be sure to get my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Gameface Lee, the show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline. We are also featured on Dash Radio under the Nothing But Net Radio Network, the Baseline NBA show. So for our Dash listeners, be sure to check us out 1 p.m. every Tuesday. And then we also re-roll out our show on Wednesday as well, too. So we love giving you the exclusive content covering all things happening in the association. And hey, man, we are really excited to have our man. He is the chief content officer for the brand new site that has just been rolled out, basketballnews.com. Our man, Alex Kennedy, will be hopping on board with us in a few moments to talk about the site, talk about the NBA playoffs, and really just lay out a lot of great stories, man, working with this brother. So exciting stuff. And as always, man, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us. So let's not waste any time, man. I know you ready for it. We ready for it. You know how we roll, baby. Let's do a little FaceTime with the Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw doing a little FaceTime with the Baseline. And we are really excited to have on board with us to sit down and politic and rap. It's been a long time, and you know it cannot be said enough that he is definitely one of the mainstays in keeping us abreast with everything that's going on in the NBA. We don't even consider him more of as an insider. He's more of a probe, so to speak. You got to tap into this guy's mind in order to really get a feel for how much knowledge and for the way that he kind of lays everything out, covering everything going on in the game of basketball. And I guess now he's spreading the love because him and his entity have collaborated and have put together a new site that is going to help evolve and again lay out more information and more great content from their minds. And it's just wonderful to have us as you know, the Baseline, as we like to basically express within our own, the ability to say, man, it is great to be able to have the chief content officer come on board and talk about this new venture, basketballnews.com. He is the man, Alex Kennedy. Alex, thanks for hopping on board with this, man.
Thank you so much. I'm flattered. That was amazing. I really appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost a little, I almost got a little, flabbergasted myself as well, too, because just like yourself, man, this all came about quickly. And it's not going to be on us to really give people the digs on how basketball news has came about. So, you know, lay it out for us, Alex. What made you decide to say, it's no longer just me contributing and writing pieces and articles? What made you decide to say, I want to get together, I want to bring together some great minds, not just writers, but also former athletes, former coaches? What made you decide to say, we need to get together and do this so we can, again, branch out and give people another true, genuine perspective of how the game of basketball is being covered?
Yeah, I've always enjoyed managing a staff and building a team. That's something that I've done in the past. Before I was at USA Today and Hoops Hype, I was at Basketball Insiders. Before that, it was a site called Hoops World. And then even at USA Today, we had a thing called USA Today NBA Wire, where we basically spun up a bunch of different team and player-centric blogs that covered the different teams and hired different beat writers and things like that. So I've always enjoyed building a staff. I started covering the NBA at a very young age. I was 14 years old, getting credentialed to games, and I always appreciated when journalists helped me and went out of their way to help me, mentor me, help me get jobs, things like that. So I feel like that's very important. I've always taken a lot of pride in helping younger journalists and up and coming journalists, whether they're, at high school age, college age, or whether they're just someone that's been grinding for a while that deserves an opportunity and deserves credit for what they've been doing and deserves a full-time job. So that's something that's always been important to me. So as much as I love my job at Hoops Hype and USA Today, and the guys over there were fantastic, I had an amazing 4 years there. I really wanted to be able to manage my own team, assemble a group, and as you mentioned, have players on our staff as well. I think you're seeing now there's so much of there's a need for player-driven content. We see it with Uninterrupted. You see the podcast with JJ Redick, CJ McCollum, all these players, Matt Barnes, Steven Jackson. These guys have podcasts that are blowing up. So there's clearly an audience for it. And so I felt like I could kind of do the things that I love, player-driven content and managing a staff and building a team of journalists under one, roof. So that's basically what basketballnews.com became. They brought me on about 2 months ago, and we've been, putting out content. We've been building the site, making sure there's no bugs, getting it ready for launch. So it's been, a crazy month and a half, 2 months. But and then really it's been building the staff, talking to a ton of different players, trying to find guys that are a good fit to write articles, host podcasts, do videos. Eventually we want to do long form content, web series, documentaries, things like that. So it was a matter of finding the right players and then also finding the right journalists. So it's been a crazy month and a half, 2 months, but it's really exciting to actually have the site up now, to have actually launched.
Because you've been in the game, as you alluded to, from a young age. Cal and I actually have some Orlando roots who went to UCF. I've seen you when I in my own coverage, when I was covering the Magic here and there, see you in the locker room, things of that nature. And again, you've really been grinding for a long time and doing an amazing job at it. One of the things that I think I've always enjoyed about your work is kind of, and I'm going to assimilate it to us here a little bit as well, too, is that you dig for deeper stories, something that maybe not everyone is always talking about within the NBA space. Like, we love talking about the brands associated with the league and the different deals that help the league and ultimately impact the fans as well, too. I've seen your great stories talking to agents, talking to general managers, talking to scouts, just really, really great stuff that you go about. And as you alluded to, now with the players and that content being so driven and so wanted by all NBA consumers in general, how did you really just figure out a way to leverage your relationships? Because a lot of these players, like, they may see other people doing things, but it may not be like, writing and podcasting ain't really for me. Like, how did you go and leverage what your network is with those guys to kind of get them on board?
Yeah, it's a great question. It was finding guys that are passionate about this. A lot of the guys in our staff are former players. When you talk about Kenyon Martin, James Posey, Vinny Del Negro, Etan Thomas, these are guys that made a lot of money in the NBA. So if they wanted to, they could just sit at home and hang out. They don't really work a day job like the rest of us. So I mean, they really didn't need this financially. So it's really about finding guys who are passionate about it, who are bored and want to do something, in their post NBA life. And then it's kind of the same with the current players. Troy Brown Jr. is someone who is on board with us to host a podcast and he's going to do some vlogs and things like that. If he wasn't interested in this and passionate about it, it just wouldn't work. An NBA player's schedule is too crazy. So, the first thing that would get cut if their plate, there's too much on their plate, would be, oh, I'm not doing my vlog this month. I'm not going to do a podcast. I've been working like crazy on my game. So it was really about finding guys that are passionate about this. And then, yeah, I mean, the relationships definitely came in handy. Atan was someone that I had worked with previously for different websites, editing his stuff. He's always been a writer. There are a few other players that we're talking to now that I've known for a long time. So it was really, I think the trust was there. They were not only, whenever you're a brand new website, there's no track record, there's no proof of quality content or anything like that. So the guys really had to take a chance on us, but I think we were able to sell our vision really well. And then the fact that we had a relationship already, there was some trust there. So they knew that, what kind of content we put out. They knew that, we would give them full creative control over their articles, over their podcasts, things like that. We've done a really good job of building a production team, a sales staff, things like that, to make sure guys know when they come work for us, the quality is going to be very high, and we're going to be able to monetize their podcast, their articles, their videos, things like that. So yeah, it was a lot of trust, and it was a lot based on the relationships, but it was also finding the right players who have an interest in this kind of thing, because if they weren't going to be passionate about it, then it probably wasn't going to work, and it would have been, okay, well, they come on board for a month and then get sick of it. So that was part of the process, finding the right players who actually have interest in this.
So hold on, Cal. Let me follow up real quick. So Todd is amazing. I followed his social media for a good little while as well too, and super intellectual, and just can put things out there that makes it, again, not just about sports, just about life in general. I think that's an amazing get. And I think even talking about what you talked about with those networks, I'm going to just dig a little deeper, my journalistic side here a little bit. Were you able to go directly to the player, or did you have to go through agents as well too, like how oftentimes when it comes to getting these kind of deals in place?
Yeah, it varies. With someone like Atan, we were close. He's been on my podcast a bunch. I've been on his radio show. We've done a lot of things together. And again, he's written with me in the past. So I was able to reach right out to him. And yeah, he's amazing. I've been so impressed. He's been a machine. He's pumping out article after article. I think we hired him 2 weeks ago, and he's written 5 articles in that time. I mean, he's a machine. He's someone that he would have been a great writer or a great reporter no matter what. He just happened to play basketball. So that's the kind of guy that we really want on our staff, because, not only is he great as a writer, but we're also talking about bringing his podcast to our network too, The Rematch. So he just can do it all. He's amazing. But some of the players, we did have to go through their agent, and I totally understand that. I didn't want to try to go around anyone or upset anyone. A lot of these guys, they get tons of opportunities thrown their way. So, their agent has to do the job. The PR person involved with them has to do the job and make sure that, it's legitimate. And we're going to, if they're giving us the ability to use their likeness and, promote our product and work with us, then they have to make sure it's a great opportunity. So it has been a ton of conversations with agents and PR people and different people like that. But yeah, I mean, really, it was really about finding the players who are passionate about this. Someone like James Posey, he had been coaching. He was with the Cleveland Cavaliers and was on their staff whenever they won the championship in 2016. But he was thinking about making a move over to media. So we were able to find that out through, a mutual friend. And then once we found that out, we were really just all in on, getting Posey, because he has a great basketball mind. He had an amazing 12-year NBA career. So he's doing a podcast with us. He's writing a weekly article. So yeah, it was a lot of conversations with agents, but then in some cases we were able to reach right out to the player.
Alex Kennedy joining us here on the Baseline NBA podcast as we're doing a little FaceTime with the Baseline. He is the Chief Content Officer for BasketballNews.com. I want to emphasize something to what you and Shaw were just talking about, and especially as it pertains to Etan Thomas and having him on board with you guys. What I really already love about what you guys have done is you have laid out a roster of diversity. And I think, I don't know whether or not you guys probably have known, like you knew that going into this, is that if that's something that was actually a priority in how you were going to, have the type of guys that you already have on your roster. But what I appreciate already is that you have a variety of voices and that are going to help speak to a lot of the topics and the issues that are not just prevalent on what you see on the court, but also prevalent to how NBA athletes are affected off the court. And some of those individuals are knee deep in the trenches, not just covering it, but speaking to it. So Etan was already on MSNBC, I think a few days ago, talking about, social injustice and advocacy for, where the athletes are, the NBA athletes are, and using their platform to help elevate voters' rights and things of that nature. And I think that is it's so profound, because usually a voice like his, you only see once every 4 or 5 months. He gets lost in the trenches, and he's not speaking on a regular general platform that gives his voice credence, gives him the credibility. Usually it's either something that's either basketball related or they don't take him seriously at all. And so the fact that, you know, you have this list of great guys, Vinny Del Negro, James Posey, it's not just, okay, it's only Etan Thomas because he's only speaking to that. You got other guys in there that can also fill in that space as well too. And I really commend you guys for doing that, because that is very difficult. Usually when you're targeting people, you're targeting more personality. If they draw, you know, listeners, if they bring in ad buys, it's not necessarily about the talent of what they bring to the content that they're giving you. And I applaud you guys for being able to do that already. And you guys are not even 2 months into the iteration of your rollout.
Yeah, that was really important to us. I will say, you know, we do have more additions that we have to make. I want to be even more diverse. I think we are in the process right now of talking to a number of women, because that was one thing that I think we had to add to our staff. You know, early on it was, okay, let's find former NBA players. And then really the only writers that were hired, aside from me, you know, as an editor, was Nikias and Spencer. So, you know, that was something where right after we launched, it was something where it became clear, you know, we need to make sure we have some women on our staff as well. So, you know, we want to be even more diverse than we are right now, to be honest. But yeah, that was very important to me. You know, someone like Atan, it's funny, we've had that conversation where, you know, he said that he's written for The Guardian, Undefeated, ESPN, CNN, Washington Post. I mean, he has an amazing resume. But one thing that we talked about was he would try to submit certain articles or certain topics, and then either they would just water the article down entirely, or they would just deny him. So that was really important to me, to be able to make sure these guys have full creative control over what they're doing, whether it's writing articles or, you know, having their podcast and bringing different guests on, things like that. I think having the more perspectives, the better. And that was one thing that, as we were assembling our team, we kept talking about, okay, we need to have as many perspectives as we can, whether it's the journalist, whether it's a stats guy, whether it's an X's and O's guy, you know, or a former coach, a former executive, current players, retired players. It was just trying to figure out as many perspectives as we could cover, so that we could tell those kind of behind the scenes stories that I used to do at Hoops Hype. That was a big thing for me. You know, I know fans today, they've gotten so much smarter, and they know, you know, about all the players. They're going to, you know, most of our people that read my work, you don't have to explain who, you know, Chris Middleton is, for example. They know, you know, all the starters in the league, and they're really informed. They usually even know about the salary cap and the CBA and things like that. They want to know what happens behind closed doors. So I always like providing that content, the behind the scenes stuff. And then now having all these players on our staff that can also share their experiences and talk about what they've been through, not only on the court, but also off the court. And especially in a moment like this that we're seeing with the NBA, where, you know, tons of players are stepping up and speaking out. We want to make sure our players on our team have the ability to do that as well. So yeah, that was definitely, you know, a big priority for us. We wanted to make sure that we had a diverse group, excuse me. But yeah, we want to get even more diverse going forward.
So Alex, how does the site plan to segment, I guess, you know, all of that? I mean, basketball is such a wide space right now, especially tackling the issues of social justice and things of that nature. And then when you have on these, you know, super intricate topics and have these great writers and podcasters and things of that nature, how do you segment it? You know what I mean? Like, even just like to search, if I want to know about X topic on the site, what's the best way that you all are going to try to go about doing that?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, I think the big thing is we want each writer to write to their strengths, each podcast host to, you know, perform to their strengths. So someone like Atan, who has been speaking out about these things for many years and is an activist and has constantly written about these things, you know, we want him to continue to write about this stuff. And right now, if you go to the site, you know, you can search for different topics, but then you can also, on the top of the page, we have it so that you can see all of our staff members, and you click on their, you know, specific profile and read specific articles by that person. So if someone is, you know, loves an article they saw on Twitter by Atan, they could just go right to, you know, his bubble, click it basically to see a bio by him and then all of his articles. So right now it's sorted not only by topics, but also by each specific author. And then the big thing is we just want to make sure we have, you know, a wide range of content. We want to make sure, we're covering the NBA, obviously. The playoffs are happening right now. This is such an unprecedented year where everyone's in the bubble. It's a really interesting time. So we want to cover that side of the NBA, but then we also want to cover the activism, the social issues that are being addressed, everything that the players and owners are trying to do to make a difference and, have tangible change. So it's really about covering the NBA from all angles. That's really what it is. Even writing about the activism, or when Atan writes about the Bucks players sitting out their Game 5 against the Magic, that's still covering the NBA. It's just a different angle of the NBA. So that's kind of how we approach it. And eventually, too, we're not just covering the NBA. We're also going to have college basketball, high school basketball, WNBA coverage on there. That's really important to us, too, because we're basketballnews.com, not NBAnews.com or anything. So it is a lot. We want to have a variety of topics that our writers and podcasters are addressing, but we feel like we've done a pretty good job of sorting the site by articles and by authors so that you can find what you want, what you're looking for pretty easily.
How many staff are you looking to potentially bring on? It's pretty significant now, but if you're looking to get into that college space, that high school space, the WNBA space, I mean, Nikias is, from what I know of him, know him not well, but well enough. I mean, he can do WNBA content as well too. Spencer, I've worked with at Close Up 360. I know he's great at even off the court content that's not just basketball related, so to speak, those behind the scenes stories. But how large of a staff and podcasting team are you looking to bring on ultimately?
Yeah, we want to continue expanding our staff. We're having conversations with a few more players right now, so we may actually be adding a few more players, and then
WNBA players too.
Yep, we're having
Nice.
conversations with WNBA players, and then on the journalism side, we're talking with a few different writers, including several women, because again, that's really important too. We want to make sure that it's all about covering as many perspectives as possible. So yeah, that's really a big thing for us. So yeah, I mean, I don't know when those hires are going to happen as far as more players, because those conversations, one thing I've learned from this experience is that, you start talking to these agents and PR people and it gets dragged out a lot. So there have been a lot of those conversations that we hoped would be wrapped up by launch, but they're still happening. So we're still having talks with a number of guys on that front. But eventually we want to have a staff that's full of writers and journalists too, because that's the big thing. Early on, we were prioritizing former players. That was kind of who we were targeting, and that's the bulk of our conversations. That's really what they've been. But, for me, I'm someone that, again, really, I take a lot of pride in being able to identify up-and-coming journalists, people who are working really hard and deserve more than, someone like Nikias is a great example. The fact that he was working a day job that wasn't media related and was having to freelance for 5 or 6 different outlets and didn't have a full-time job is insane. I mean, the guy puts out amazing work. He breaks down the NBA better than most writers. He can do film analysis, stat analysis. He's just incredible. And his stuff is super easy to edit. It's not even, it's basically print ready the second you get it. So sorry, I'm getting worked up, but I don't understand why he was even available, because I'm glad he was, because we were able to, bring him in and give him a full-time job. But Spencer's the same way. I was super impressed with him. So we want to continue to, add to our staff as far as writers, podcasters. Our goal is to launch 10 podcasts in our first year. So right now we have James Posey's podcast, my podcast. We have a Voice of the Fan podcast called Clips and Drew. And then we're working on, starting a few others with Troy Brown Jr., Kenyon Martin. So we're, headed toward that goal. And even in the first few days, again, we launched on Friday, and we've heard from a number of players that want to get involved now. A number of writers. I've been getting so many messages and texts and calls from people that, want to get involved with what we're doing. So it's really exciting. I love that we've gotten so much support and people want to be on board with what we're doing. But yeah, to answer your question, we've kind of broke it up into phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, with everything kind of up in the air right now with college basketball, high school basketball. We've really focused more on NBA and WNBA. So that's kind of been our focus right now. But eventually we do want to have high school writers, college writers, NBA draft analysts. We want to really have a big staff that can cover every single aspect of this league. So we're going to be making more hires as far as players and writers here very soon. But then phase 2 is probably where we're going to expand to more college basketball, high school basketball, and that kind of coverage.
Alex Kennedy joining us here, Baseline NBA podcast. He's the Chief Content Officer for the freshly new and highly anticipated basketballnews.com. Be sure to catch him on his Twitter at Alex Kennedy NBA. So, Alex, a lot of stuff to absorb here, but I think the one thing that really stands out is the willingness to expand and broaden. and what I'm going to say is a future empire
I love it.
in the social media space. But with that being said, how are you guys managing that aspect of it? Because it obviously all it takes is, just for a couple of either writers or a couple of podcasts, a couple of editors, a couple of articles, and then it just starts taking off like wildfire. And everybody wants to jump on board, and you still have to maintain your principles about, what the end goal is for basketballnews.com. So how are you guys maintaining, levying yourself from not getting caught up too much, in the hype of just saying, okay, we're going to bring this person. Like you mentioned before, very selective in who you really want to have on board to be able to help channel what the mantra is that reflects basketballnews.com. Is it like yourself? Is it a team of people? Like, how is that determination process being handled?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for us is as we continue to expand and get bigger as a company, bigger as a site, bigger as a podcast network, we want people who are just producing high quality stuff. I mean, there were times where we were talking with certain players and we could have added them, but we felt like the content wouldn't be very good. And we're not just going to hire someone because of their name or hire someone because, oh, I have this many social media followers. That's great, but we're not going to hire them just because it can give us, some short term advantage or a way to promote our site. We want to make sure we have the right people. And that's, why we've been having these conversations with certain players and discussing, what their podcast would entail, training them to make sure that, whenever their podcast does launch, it's going to be really high quality, pairing them with the right co-host and things like that. And then with the articles, it's been the same way, writing about topics that are important on and off the court. So really, I think it comes down to finding the right people. And our thing is, we don't want to get to the point where we're so big that we're running into a lot of the same things that other companies run into, where
Right.
That was a big conversation actually I had with Atan Thomas today, where he was saying, some of the sites that he's written for, you can tell that they're beholden to their corporate sponsors and can't say certain things and do certain things. So he's really enjoyed, being with us and being able to say what he wants and do what he wants. And, we obviously, that's important to us. Again, making sure guys have creative control is important to us.
I have a quick follow-up on that.
Yeah.
Do you find that to be an effective way to get the best out of your writers? And even as your experience as being a writer and also now being as an editor, now a chief content officer, that giving that sense of freedom to allow your talent to express themselves whole, not, compromise them, short play them. It allows them to be able to better understand their boundaries, better understand the way that they can, lay out what they want to say, what they want to express, whether it's an opinion or if it's a piece that they're covering or an interview. Have you found that to be more effective? Because to me, and it's something that even myself and Shaw, for the years that we've been doing podcasts, we've found this to be the running trend. Everybody wants to format you before they understand what your blueprint really is.
Yeah.
And then finally, when you actually see what they can provide you with, what kind of talent that they can show you, it's already been watered down. You've mentioned it a little bit as well, too. It's been watered down. And then unfortunately, you never tap into what they are capable of really giving you to the site and also giving you to the brand as well, too. Have you found that to be the most effective means is allow them to spread their wings, learn the ropes properly, and then they will themselves be able to self-learn how to be able to disseminate their information, write their pieces in a way that can cater to everybody, so that everyone feels like they're involved in really reading what it is that's being displayed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you give people creative freedom and you're telling them, hey, you determine what you're writing about and what you're talking about in your podcast and what guests you have, I think that's the way to go. And I think part of the problem, one thing that Atan said is, at other websites what he was writing for, it got to the point where they were putting him in a box or they were turning down so many different articles and different ideas he had. It got to the point where he was thinking, okay, I don't even want to write anymore. I don't even want to be here. And he was frustrated. So that's the last thing that we want. And, if these guys want to tell certain stories, who am I to tell them, no, we're not doing that. That's not a good idea. So, and I mean, I think we've had a lot of success with, they pitch ideas to us, and I don't think I've said no to an idea yet, to be completely honest with you. And there are times where it's a brainstorm where I'm throwing out different ideas that I have, and then maybe that sparks something in one of our writers, and they think, okay, here's how we can approach that. So it's a conversation because we want to make sure, that we're all on the same page. And I also am not telling the players, okay, come up with an idea. It's on you. I'm not helping. Obviously we're suggesting different things and talking about different angles to cover the league. But no, I think that's very important. I think guys having that freedom is important to them. And then also all of these players talk, all of the people in journalism talk. So if we have a reputation for shutting down ideas and not letting people actually cover certain topics they want to talk about that they're passionate about, then we're not going to get very far. Just to be completely honest with you, we're going to end up. It's going to be, remember that basketballnews.com site that was pretty cool for a few months and then went away very quickly. That's we don't want to be in that position. We want guys to love working for us, cover what they're passionate about. And it's come up too. We've had conversations with a few players that, have a lot of off-court interest, whether it's fashion or music or things like that. And we have said, absolutely cover that stuff in your podcast because we want you to be excited about your podcast and recording it and what guests you're going to have and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's very important. I think if you don't do it that way, you're going to run into a lot of consequences. And look, I understand why some sites and some companies operate the way they do because either they're a broadcast partner of the league or they have certain corporate sponsorships and they're just thinking if we don't do it this way, then we're going to run into all these different issues and we'll have to be putting out fires left and right. So don't get me wrong, like I understand why certain places do that. I think because we're an up and coming site, a newer site, and we don't have relationship like that with the NBA, or we don't have some of those different things, I think it gives us actually an advantage and lets us do certain things that other companies can't.
Right.
Man, Alex, you're talking my language again, bro. Just when you talk that,
and Sean knows many languages. Yes, he does.
When you're here talking about we're not into that, and I'm not knocking where we're at in terms of society in 2020, but you're not worried about having influencers. You're not worrying about, how many followers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're worried about the core content. And I think that's immensely important. But you are taking a risk, you and your group. I mean, it's a massive risk. At least it's a simple name, right? Basketball News, if you do that from an SEO standpoint, it's bound to pop up. You know what I mean? In some aspect. But this is madness because there are so many websites right now. There's so many podcasts. Cal and I talk about it all the time. I was like, when we started our podcast 6 amount of years ago, there was only this many. Now it's a zillion, that cover even basketball in itself. And just what about it? And I need you to brag here a little bit. It's just what about your group and just the special way that you're going about what you're doing will make this stand out and be successful, because this space is madness right now. Everyone is trying to get in. Everyone wants a piece of a pie. And to some degree, everyone can get a bit, but to be successful to the level that I think you all want to be, it's going to have to be really special.
No, absolutely. This is something that we've talked about a lot. It starts with, I think, having the players that are, part of our staff that are pumping out high quality articles and podcasts and things like that. I've been at newer sites when it was just all journalists, and that was very hard to differentiate ourselves because, you can have creative ideas and cover the league in a different way. And again, do different kind of articles, but they don't always get the attention that maybe you feel they deserve. So I think when you have the players who they do have, I mentioned that we're not hiring people just for their social media platform, but one advantage of having some of these players on our staff is they do tend to have huge social media following. So, that's one thing that we've seen with Etan Thomas or James Posey, for example. When he writes an article that's really, really good, it's going to get noticed. Whereas, there are times where journalists out there write an article, they've spent tons of time on it, and then, it doesn't really get the attention that they hoped and kind of just, no one really reads it. So I do think having the players is a big differentiator for us, especially in today's market where, again, there's so many podcasts out there that are blowing up, player-based podcasts with, Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson with All the Smoke. You have Quentin Richardson, Darius Miles, JJ Redick, CJ McCollum, and you go down the list. All these guys have had successful podcasts. And then on the article side, too, we've seen what the Players Tribune has been able to do. We've seen what some of these different websites have been able to do by getting players involved in writing. So I think that's first thing I always mention when you talk about our staff. I think we've made really good hires, and I think our players can really help us differentiate ourselves from different websites. But the one thing too that we haven't gotten into, my founder Chad Horstman, the guy that started the company, his expertise is internet marketing and SEO. He actually made all his money from a website called Yandy.com, which is the lingerie company. back in 2005, he noticed that lingerie was a search term that was coming up constantly on Google, but there wasn't a lot of competition online for it. So he started from his own garage a lingerie company, just thinking there's a market for this, and then turned it into a $50 million company and sold in 2016. So he has, I mean, every time I talk to him, I'm blown away by, all of his different ideas and ways to manipulate the Google rankings and, get our name out there. He has just tons of internet marketing and SEO ideas. And that's, you mentioned, basketballnews.com. That's why it's the name of our site, because he's constantly thinking about Google and ways to increase our audience and then monetize that audience. So I think, that's kind of how our site was built, with all of that in mind. And every single aspect of the site is built to make sure we can have the biggest audience possible and then monetize everything that we're doing, from articles to podcasts to videos to long form content. So I think we have the right people in place to not only grow an audience, but monetize it. And then I think the players are a big part of that too, because again, they bring people to the site, they're notable names, and it's not even just about, their following and stuff like that. They have amazing experiences. I mean, I could talk to players for hours and hours and hours. And a lot of times they don't even know how cool their stories are, how cool their experiences are, until you kind of mine it out of them, and then people love it. So I just think right now we've seen that player-driven content can be successful and is being, is successful. And then that plus the team that we have in place, that, the higher ups, I think they're going to do a great job of making sure that content gets in front of as many eyeballs as possible.
So before we transition to a little NBA conversation in general, before we close this thing out, I got to ask you, just, I'm one of those, like what you just said, you can talk to players for hours. I think I'm kind of on the maybe even more nerdy side. I can talk to coaches for hours. I just think coach speak and just the way they see the game is just so intellectual and amazing in general. What are some of your favorite things that have happened or stories thus far? And what are some stories that you've heard from some of these players that you can share with us, for our listeners as well too?
Yeah, James Posey's been full of them. He's starting a thing called the Posecast, and basically he has former teammates on and players that he coached and different friends from around the NBA on the podcast, and that's going to start, I believe, next week. So I'm excited to share that. But he recorded a few episodes already. He's had Ray Allen on, he's talked with Shaq, Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce. I mean, guys that he played with, in Miami, Boston. So he has just tons of stories, and he actually did an article. His first article came out on basketballnews.com with TJ Ford. He interviewed him, and it was a super in-depth Q&A. And they actually, the one thing that he will get out of players that I could never get is they just have so many experiences together and so much, even when I have a relationship with a player, it's not the same as when you were teammates and you were fighting every single, fighting alongside each other every single night and playing alongside each other. So it was really interesting, reading his conversation with TJ Ford, where they're talking about their stint with the Indiana Pacers together and how miserable they were because the front office and coaching staff were playing games. And they basically said, if we didn't have each other, we would have both been super depressed. And, it was really interesting to hear them talk about that. But then they also, the next second, they're talking about, TJ Ford showing up to the rookie transition program for his photo shoot with super baggy pants that the Milwaukee Bucks sent him. And those photos went, they became a meme, basically, went viral. So, James was, teasing him about that. And he told the story behind that. And then next conversation, next moment, they're talking about the first time getting traded and how it was super hard for TJ. And, he wasn't expecting it and was blindsided. And then TJ, was able to ask, hey, James, what was the first time you got traded like? So they're going back and forth and, just sharing stories and bouncing back and forth. And that's what James' podcast is. This was the interview with TJ, but he's doing the same thing with Shaq and with KG. And then, that's just James Posey. You start talking to a ton. He's someone that played with Michael Jordan. He's someone that has been involved with activism throughout his entire career. He started writing during his career too. So he has all these different stories and experiences. And then Vinny Del Negro, he has experiences as a player, as a front office executive for the Phoenix Suns, as a head coach for the Chicago Bulls and Los Angeles Clippers. So I've loved being able to pick Vinny's brain and talk to him about different things. His first article for Basketball News was we talked about why scoring was up in the bubble. And we thought, because these guys are playing on the same rims and baskets every single day, rather than having to adjust to a new arena, because these guys aren't traveling across the country, the superstars are well rested and they're able, they're not taking a red eye flight. They're just going back to their hotel room. So they're super well rested and can drop 55 points the next night. There was all these different reasons, the depth perception in those arenas, there's no fans. There's black curtains around the entire court. So the shooters have said that the depth perception is better, and it's so much fun to be able to pick Vinny Del Negro's brain and ask him these questions and talk to him about these different topics, because he's super knowledgeable and sees the game differently than I do, and James Posey sees the game differently than I do, and all these different players have all these experiences. So it's just been amazing. I've had so much fun jumping on our conference calls, helping these guys with certain articles, editing them, and suggesting different things. So yeah, I'm really excited for everyone to be able to listen to the Posecast and then listen to all the different things and read all the different pieces of content that we have coming up soon, because these guys are super knowledgeable, and even when they're not just telling their own stories or sharing experiences, the way they break down today's players and certain games, it's just, I would pay money to sit there and watch a game with these guys, and I'm getting paid to do it. It's crazy.
Well, we're hoping at some point that we'll be able to get James Posey to talk about his new podcast, the Posecast.
Let's do it.
That would be awesome. Alex Kennedy joining us here on the Baseline, doing FaceTime with the Baseline, Chief Content Officer for basketballnews.com. All right, Alex, we done let you lay it all out how Basketball News is going to take over the whole NBA landscape of covering the NBA. So I think it's only right that we also have you on here to give us your perspective on what we've seen so far in this NBA.
Nope, I gotta go. No, I'm
that was my 35 plug. I'm done. I got to put it all on basketballnews.com. You get nada on the Baseline. So talk. First things first. Give us your perspective about what has really stuck out to you with regards to the NBA's capacity to be able to roll out the restart. To what we've already seen so far, with the Memphis Grizzlies and the Portland Trailblazers giving us that great, 8 seed game. The Blazers, as far as, what they showed us, to put themselves in that position, how we're seeing from the top seeded teams so far. And just kind of give us your general feel for what you're seeing, what really stands out to you so far with the NBA restart and the playoffs.
Yeah, it's been incredible. First of all, the NBA deserves so much credit for being able to make this happen. I look at the way Major League Baseball or the NFL has kind of handled the situation, and it seems like the NFL is kind of just crossing their fingers and hoping that nothing happens, and it's frustrating. I'm a big football fan.
Sounds pretty familiar.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
has a top end kind of feel to this, but
right. But I'm a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, so this is the one year we're going to actually be good, and then this all happens. So it's been frustrating as a football fan, but it makes me appreciate the NBA even more. What Adam Silver and these guys did in a shorter period of time than the NFL or other leagues have had to prepare, to be able to have this bubble and have it be so successful with no positive cases inside the bubble, it's been incredible. So that's the first thing. I have to give them credit for what they've been able to do. But it's just been so much fun. Again, we did the article talking about how scoring is up in the bubble. It seems like every day there's a new crazy offensive performance, either from a player, whether it's Donovan Mitchell or Jamal Murray, and then teams too. I mean, there are so many teams that are putting up just crazy numbers. So it's been a lot of fun to see. It's such a unique atmosphere with no fans. I'm really curious to see what a Game 7 between Utah and Denver looks like without fans and in this environment.
Hey, Alex, real quick, I have something to ask you in regards to what you were just saying. Is it also part the fact that these amazing numbers that guys like Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell, even LeBron, AD, Kawhi, even Paul, Luka, right? Like all of this is not just something of us saying, this is just bad defense all the time. Like these guys are really putting out amazing performances. The shot making ability that some of these guys are doing, I don't think happens in any regular course of an 82 game season over this type of stretch of the way that they've laid out the playoffs and how these guys are competing in this particular bubble, which to me is what stands out more than anything. This is not fluff numbers that these guys are putting up. These are actually legitimate, like, oh my God, like I could only imagine if these guys were playing on the Rucker, that they would be court legends type status the way that they're playing.
No, yeah, to be clear, even though it's different, the offensive numbers, these guys deserve all the credit in the world for what they're doing. I don't want to seem like I'm saying, it's because they're in the bubble and, Like I think it's really impressive what these guys are doing. Watching Jamal Murray, the way it's not even just that he scored that many points. He did it on 17 of 24 shooting and 9 of 12 from 3. I mean, just super efficient. I've been so impressed with watching these guys. And I think part of it, I think, is defenses, I think, have been hurt more because, that was one thing that Vinny mentioned too, that defenses, use the crowd, the game environment more. So they feed off the crowd's energy at times, or the continuity that's so important on defense and communication. Whenever there's a break mid-season and guys are at home for 4 months working out on their own, when you come back, he felt like that break hurt defenses more, affected defenses more than it affects the offensive, performances. So I don't know. It is interesting to see, that scoring is up so much. It was up in the seeding games, and it's up even more in the playoffs so far. So it has been really interesting to see that. But yeah, I mean, it has just been incredible. It's been so much fun to watch too. Like if you're an NBA fan, you're not enjoying this, I have no idea what you could possibly want, because at the end, the superstars are playing at an insane level. What Luka was doing was just ridiculous on a hurt ankle at 21 years old. It's been so much fun to watch. So I love the bubble. I think it's interesting to see some of the changes, but yeah, these guys absolutely deserve credit because it's been amazing to watch.
Two-part question, because we know you got to run here. There's also games on as we're recording here right now as well too. But just with Cal's point earlier to the playing game, do you think that it's here to stay? What have you heard from some of your league insiders, if you will? And then secondly, just some predictions, man. Who you got coming out of the semifinals?
Yeah, I feel like the playing game could be here to stay. I think there was a really positive response to it. I'm curious to see how it would work, going forward, just because I think there are some specifics that would need to be worked out. But I think the NBA, that's to be playing for your season is so much fun. And we see that sometimes where it's the last, game of the regular season, the last day of the regular season, and certain games, teams are essentially fighting for their playoff hopes and fighting to keep their season alive. But that playing game, it was so much fun to watch. The way those guys were, the effort out there. I think it would be, I think they should continue it. I don't know if they're going to, but I think they should. And I think everyone I talked to, it's been overwhelmingly positive that they should continue it. As far as predictions, now that's tough. I think Miami-Milwaukee could be a really interesting series. We did an article. Nikias actually wrote an article about why.
I'm sure he did.
Yeah,
Miami homers alone.
Yeah, it was a great breakdown, though. It broke down.
I'm sure it had a Karen in Paris feel to it as well, too, about what he thinks with the Bucks. But I digress. Okay,
that is the best Twitter name, by the way. I have to say, I crack up every time I see it. But no, so it was. And I've heard from other people too. I know Howard Beck was predicting that Miami is going to beat them. I think it's going to be an amazing series. It wouldn't surprise me if it went to 7 games. I really hope it does, because that would just be so much fun. But right now, if I had to predict, I have Milwaukee. I still think Milwaukee wins. I just think it's going to be a lot closer than maybe some people think. I have Milwaukee coming out of the Eastern Conference. I feel like we haven't seen Giannis be able to take it that far yet, but he's just playing so well right now. And I think that supporting cast around him is terrific. I think Brooke Lopez, Chris Middleton, I think Mike Budenholzer has done a fantastic job too. So I think Milwaukee comes out of the East, and then it's tough. All season long, we've been looking forward to a possible Lakers-Clippers matchup in the Western Conference Finals. It's what everyone wants to see. As of right now, after seeing that Dallas-Clippers series and kind of, the Clippers not looking great, Paul George kind of being iffy and having some games where he really struggled, I'm leaning toward the Lakers. So I think right before the seeding game started and the bubble games even started, I was saying Milwaukee versus the Lakers. So I'm going to stick with that. I had the Lakers winning it all over the Bucks. So that's been my prediction. I'm sticking with it. But I think these series could be a lot closer than a lot of people think. I don't think it's not going to be like when we saw Golden State and Cleveland year after year. Just, everyone assumes, though, it's going to be them again. I think you're going to have some really close series. It's going to be really hard fought. And I think even that series, Lakers Bucks could be a 7-game series. That's, those two teams are really evenly matched. So those are my predictions right now. But I think you're going to have some really fun series. And I think that's going to be really good for the NBA, especially because, if these offensive performances keep up and this trend of high scoring, teams and then crazy stat lines for players keeps up, you're going to have just an amazing rest of the postseason.
Alex, man, it's funny how you laid everything out with regards to the Western Conference, and Sean and I are obviously going to give our perspective on it. I feel like, the Lakers, man, they may have been given a raw deal with how everything is playing out with this NBA restart, because we're really relying on the greatness of LeBron James and Anthony Davis to really kind of supplant that premonition. Because keep in mind, they're going to wind up playing, possibly, the Houston Rockets. I think if you're the Lakers, you would hope that it would have been the Oklahoma City Thunder. We don't think that they have enough in the tank. And so if you're the Los Angeles Clippers, you're probably going to have a dog-tired, either Utah Jazz or Denver Nuggets to deal with. And that just allows or buys time for the Clippers to really get that tandem together between Leonard and Paul George, to really kind of get themselves on a LeBron AD level. We know that Kawhi is already there. He's on that LeBron level. But will Paul George elevate himself to that AD level? Can he get himself to that point? I still believe in the Clippers, possibly getting out of the finals. Maybe it's because it's my belief that I think when push comes to shove in the overall roster and depth of team defense, the Clippers, I think, prevail over the Lakers, and the Lakers are going to, it's going to be because they don't have that roster that everyone said, if it's LeBron's roster, that's who he's running with. He'll be able to take them all the way. The not having Avery Bradley and not having Rondo, I think it makes the difference. I just think it does. And so it'll be interesting to see. And I'm curious where Shaw is on that based on what you have elevated in this conversation about your predictions.
Well, only thing I'll touch on the Clippers real quick is, I've been concerned about them not being able to be healthy and get that chemistry and continuity together. I think all year it's been like, oh, well, wait till Harrell and Williams and everybody's there.
Yeah.
All right, well, now they're here. And they haven't looked great, and again, and they struggled in a series that Porzingis played whatever it was, one game or a game and a half. So to me, I'm concerned. I'm like you all, where I want to stick with what I said. I want to be a consistent individual. So I'm hoping that they pull the proverbial ish together in that aspect and give us a great series. But that LA versus LA thing seems like it's destined. How it ends up playing out, I really think it is any man's, guess. It's a toss up in that aspect. And, to Alex's point earlier on in the East, yeah, man, it's hard for me to go against Milwaukee in general. But I am questioned, Alex, what do you got on Toronto, Boston? Just real quick, who do you think is winning?
I knew you were going to go there.
Yeah, I like Boston. I like Boston a lot. I like.
It was the leprechaun in the room, not the elephant in the room. It was the leprechaun in the room. It had to be asked.
I do have to say, I feel bad for Raptors fans because in the Raptors team, because I feel like they haven't gotten enough credit for what they've been able to do all season long to be able to, lose Kawhi Leonard and Danny Green and have this amazing season. It's just incredible. I think they're a team that I wonder if the playoffs were just regular this season and, everyone was in their home floor, they benefit so much from that Toronto crowd. We've seen that. Their home court advantage there is incredible. So I wonder if things would be a little bit different if they weren't in the bubble, but I love this Boston team. I have Boston winning it probably in 6 games, I'll say. I think it could be a good series, but I like the Celtics a lot. But going back to what you were saying real quick, you mentioned, the Lakers and Clippers. One thing that I think is interesting about the Lakers that I didn't mention, Quinn Cook did an article for us on basketballnews.com, and he pointed out, the Lakers have amazing championship experience on this roster. They have 6 players that have won a championship. 3 of them have multiple rings, and then 4 of their coaches have won championships either as a player or as a coach. So I think that, that usually gets overlooked. We don't talk about that enough, what guys have done in the past. And granted, it doesn't mean, oh, they're definitely going to win it all this year. But when you're in those big moments, and especially a year like this where everything is different, and, usually you can say, oh, this guy's seen everything the NBA can throw at him. Well, not this year. Now you're in a bubble. There's no fans. It's crazy. It's so different. So I think having those guys that have championship experience is really important, and having strong leaders is really important too, and that strong chemistry. That's always important, but especially in a year like this where everything's a little bit different, you need to be able to step up no matter what's thrown at you. And that's one thing that Quinn talked about in the article. He said, they've always been a really close team and had great chemistry, but since Kobe Bryant passes away, the pandemic happens. Now you're in the bubble. They're spending 24/7 together. They're eating every meal. Then they're back in their hotel room playing Madden. Then they're watching versus battles. Then they're, at practice, and then they're going to eat again. They're together 24/7. And he was saying they're even closer than before. And he said it almost feels like an AAU team where, you're just hanging out nonstop when you're not on the floor together. So I think that chemistry and then that championship experience, it could really help the Lakers too.
I find that to be an amazing point that you're making because, we can even harken back, Alex, to the situation with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert and how before because of the pandemic, there was already that speculation that neither one of those guys wanted to be around each other if and when they eventually wanted to play basketball. And I think it's because of the fact that they were forced to have to be in the bubble that they had to sort out whatever their differences were for the greater good of, putting them in this position. Yes, they obviously, as we're recording this, the Jazz as a team, have to play a game 7 against the Denver Nuggets. But I don't think that would have even been the case, because I didn't predict the Jazz were even going to get past game 5 with the Denver Nuggets, with the way that I didn't see how this team was really gelled together. You can see how those steps have to be incremental. Some teams, it clicks. But for other teams, they need that time. They need to go through that adversity. They need to go through some tough losses to really reevaluate and reprioritize what's important for them to be on the same page to execute whatever is necessary for them to win those games. And, it's interesting how you mentioned that. That's the first thing that popped in my mind, and why we're talking about teams like the Utah Jazz and teams like the Denver Nuggets. They just don't have those leadership guys who have multiple rings and have the championship medal in them. They got to search and find a way, however and wherever they can under these circumstances.
Yeah, the teams that have been there before have such an advantage. They really do, because you know what it takes. You know that you have to make sacrifices and put all that individual stuff aside and, come together as a team. And then also, when you're in the bubble like that and you are spending 24/7 together, certain teams, it's going to bring them even closer. And then certain teams, it's just going to make guys super annoyed with each other, and they're not going to want to be around each other, and it's going to actually hurt their chemistry. So it really comes down to what team, what your team is like, in terms of the makeup and personalities and chemistry. Because, I think a lot of fans would love to believe that all their favorite players on their favorite team get along and they're all buddies, but we all know that's not true. Some of these guys just go out there, perform when they're on the court, but then leave the court and they don't really talk, they don't really hang out. The bubble is forcing everyone to be that kind of team where you're always together. Now, there have been certain reports and rumors of, oh, this guy's not really hanging out with this team, he's actually going to hang out with the other team, and that's been kind of interesting. And there's been talk like, oh, is the next super team going to form in the bubble? Could that actually cause that? But you're seeing some of these teams, are benefiting from that time together, and some aren't.
Right. I mean, I think you even have an article up right now about that, what's the next super team, potentially. And then I saw how basically all the, for lack of a better phrase, kind of all the Euro guys, Doncic and Jokic and Nurkic, they were all hanging out together.
A lot of itch going on. A lot of itch.
and it bugged me out, because I just remember the days of Nurkic and Jokic being in Denver together. And ultimately, and again, I always thought there was beef there, but I guess it wasn't really beef between them. It was just, the circumstances of playing time in that situation. But it is interesting, because you do wonder, does the bubble potentially create that almost Olympic atmosphere where, hey, now guys are talking, whispering and rubbing elbows, like, hey man, come play with me. You're gonna be available, next year or whatever. I know Oladipo, and there's a lot of stuff even with the Kais, Oladipo to Miami, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just really quickly, I know you got to run here, but what's your thought on that? Is that a potential outcome of the bubble?
I think it's possible. I see both sides of it. So I think certainly if guys are hanging out and getting to know each other better, that can only help when it comes down to, recruiting later on. And it reminds me almost of whenever Kevin Durant went to Golden State, one of the things that he said was he saw how much fun they had as a team, and he felt like he had been stressed and not having that kind of fun in Oklahoma City. So that is another thing, if you're seeing, oh man, that team has so much fun every single day and all their guys get along, I would love to be a part of that culture. It's not even just the on-court stuff, it's the off-court stuff that factors in sometimes too. So, that aspect of it, I do agree, could have an impact on free agency. My argument, though, is I think it's a little bit different than the Olympic atmosphere where, we always hear the story, LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, that started with Team USA. They came together, decided they want to play together, blah, blah, blah. That's the big rumor. At Team USA, you don't have your entire organization seeing who you're hanging out with. If, LeBron was there with the entire Cleveland Cavaliers organization and Chris Bosh was there with the whole Toronto Raptors organization, I doubt they would have been hanging out as much, because you're worried that, potentially your team could see you thinking of leaving and stuff. So I think that is an interesting thing to keep in mind, that it is different than the Olympic atmosphere where no one cares who you hang out with. And part I will say this too, I don't think some fans realize how much these guys hang out in the offseason together, where they're all working out together anyway. I remember one year at Impact Basketball, the Joe Abunassar and the trainers there, they had like 6 different players who all ended up on the Toronto Raptors, and they all got close. They had like Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, Amir John. They had a long list of guys that, got close through Impact Basketball, and then all happened to land on the Raptors, and they all signed there. So sometimes people don't realize, it's not like in the bubble, this is the first time guys are hanging out and getting to know each other. Sometimes they're already close from the training environment in the off season when they're hanging out in all the same places. But no, I think there are factors where I could see it having an impact, where guys see how much fun they're having and they start connecting. But I also think guys have to be a little bit careful because they don't want to go start hanging out with other guys, and then their team is like, wait a second, is he going to leave us? Maybe we should trade him. There's that aspect too, where people actually care who you're hanging out with and your whole organization is there. So I see both sides of it.
I tell you, man, we could be doing this all night long, Alex. When they say you got stories, I don't know. You don't need to go and go get Vinny. You don't need to go get James. You don't need to go get Eton. You don't even need to get Quinn and them. We just need you, Alex. We just need you.
I appreciate it.
He is the Chief Content Officer for basketballnews.com, brand new site that is diverse and covers all aspects of the NBA, the culture on and off the court. Alex, man, we really appreciate you hopping on board with us this week, man. Great stuff as always. Best of luck, man, and we definitely would love to get you back on here down the road, brother.
No, absolutely. Let's do it. I appreciate all the kind words. I appreciate you guys letting me come on and talk about myself for way too long. And I want to say you guys do a great job too. I love Close Up 360. You guys do a fantastic job over there. I think the site's amazing. I know Josh and Jared and everyone over there. And Spencer was doing some great work with you guys too at one point. So I love the staff you guys have and the work you do too. So thank you for letting me come on and chat with you guys. I appreciate it.
Man, what more can be said, Shaw? Props to our man Alex. Man, he is just doing some wonderful stuff. I know your relationship with Alex goes way back, and the great experiences that you've had, working alongside of him, in your guys' field and covering sports, but also in just various different places, man. The fact that you guys are all within the same circle, I think means a lot. And you see that in the way that he rolls out, the people that he's connected with. It's kind of funny, man. It's almost like everybody is kin to everybody. When we say that basketball is a brotherhood, it's not just because guys played basketball. It's if you've covered basketball, if you've watched basketball, if you affiliated and associated yourself around people who are in that basketball space. There's an affinity there. There is a brotherhood that's there, and it's often shared and it's displayed in the work that they do. And Alex is just one of those guys, man. I mean, he's always done great stuff, and this is no different. And I'm really excited to see basketballnews.com take off and the litany of superstar and it's just awesome all around, man. It's just awesome stuff.
No, that's a talented dude, and honestly and truly, I want to oversell this. I've seen him around. He doesn't know me, or he didn't really know me. I just, I'm kind of hustling on the low. He's been with the larger size doing his thing for a very, very long time, and always been an admirer of his work and the things that he's been able to accomplish, and really the great stories that he's been able to tell over the course of his career. And I think taking on a new venture in the way that he has, is a testament to just how great of a person he is and how much of a wide network he has as well too. Listen, I don't know if he talked about this kind of even on air, but kind of off air, we're discussing, hey, they stole him away from Hoops Hype because they're like, hey, we want you to lead the way. And he did, and he gathered the players, gathered the writers, the whole nine, and they're still going to be growing and building. And I think Basketball News is going to be, again, a mainstay of sites. And, you and I, we've been around, we even bounced around a little bit from different sites and networks and things of that nature, who a lot of false promises, and I just don't think that's going to be the case here with what they have going on, especially with the launch team that they're rolling out here immediately. So shouts to him. If you're a fan and listener of The Baseline, be a fan and listener of Basketball News and what Alex Kennedy and his team are doing over there as well.
Absolutely. And, again, man, we want to wish those guys, the best of luck. I know this will not be the only time that our paths will cross with them. They just have a really talented roster full of great individuals who have a lot to say and a lot to cover, because the NBA just doesn't operate in a small space. And I think that they already have such a talented roster of people that can go out there and get those stories, get that content that we all crave for more than anything. So once again, man, we'd like to thank you and yours for hopping on board, doing a little FaceTime with The Baseline. We'd like to thank our man, Alex Kennedy, again, Chief Content Officer for basketballnews.com. Be sure to catch him on Twitter at Alex Kennedy NBA. For The Baseline, Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. We do.